Imagine this. It's 1937. You're Amelia Earhart, aviator, record breaker, celebrity, and all-around icon of competence. You've crossed oceans, broken barriers, and stared down a world that told you, repeatedly, that women should probably not be doing loop-de-loops over the Pacific. You've proven them wrong again and again. You're elegant, fearless, and wearing a leather flight jacket that could probably make a stone wall look dashing. And now, you're attempting something truly outrageous. You're going to fly around the world, not metaphorically, not in spirit. Literally. In 1937, when airplanes were basically noisy tin cans with wings, radios that worked when they felt like it, and navigation systems based mostly on optimism and pointing at the ocean. You're piloting a Lockheed Electra, sleek, silver, and shaped like a bullet built by someone who thought, yeah, this should work. Your navigator is Fred Noonan, a man whose entire job is to make sure you don't miss an entire continent. And together, you take off into history. The world watches in awe. Newspapers print maps with dotted red lines showing your route. Children follow your journey on globes. Politicians give speeches about courage. You are, quite literally, the coolest person alive. And then you disappear. No crash site, no wreckage, no clear radio signal. Just gone. Vanished into thin, possibly humid, mid-Pacific air. And for nearly a century, everyone has been asking the same question. What happened to Amelia Earhart? Did she crash? Did she survive on a deserted island? Was she captured by the Japanese? Was she secretly a spy? Or, my personal favorite, did she land in New Jersey, change her name, and spend the rest of her life pretending to be a librarian who just really hated attention? The theories range from the logical to the beautifully insane, and each one, somehow, makes her story even bigger. Because disappearing is one thing, but disappearing perfectly, so that no one ever really knows, that's art. Before she became an unsolved mystery, Amelia Earhart was a full-blown sensation. She wasn't just an aviator, she was aviation's first rock star. Born in 1897, raised in Kansas, Amelia wasn't the type to sit still. She climbed trees, shot rats with a rifle, and collected headlines instead of hobbies. While most girls were encouraged to master embroidery, Amelia was mastering the fine art of saying, "No thanks. I'm busy defying gravity." When she saw her first airplane at age 10, she reportedly found it unimpressive. A rusty wire and wood thing, which, to be fair, it was. Early airplanes looked less like machines of flight and more like someone's unsuccessful attempt at furniture. But by her early 20s, Amelia caught the flying fever. She took lessons, scraped money together for a second-hand plane, and began racking up records like they were frequent flyer miles. In 1928, she became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic, though technically she was the passenger. Still, when she landed, she was greeted like a hero. America didn't care about technicalities. They just wanted someone to cheer for. And Amelia looked exactly like the kind of woman who could stare down both the sky and societal expectations while maintaining perfect posture. By 1932, she flew the Atlantic solo, 5 years after Charles Lindbergh, but arguably with twice the charisma. She was witty, confident, and stubbornly allergic to mediocrity. She was also one of the first celebrities to truly understand branding. She licensed luggage. She designed fashion. She wrote books. She even endorsed cigarettes, which, at the time, were seen as symbols of liberation. Not lung failure. In short, Amelia Earhart wasn't just flying planes. She was flying the idea of herself. And it worked. The public adored her. She was living proof that courage looked good in goggles. But behind the cool exterior was an intense restlessness. Records weren't enough. Fame wasn't enough. She wanted the ultimate flight. A trip around the world. One continuous line of courage. Wrapped around the planet. She called it the final great flight. It sounded simple enough on paper. Fly around the Earth near the equator, covering 29,000 miles. In practice, it was a logistical nightmare. They'd need multiple stops across continents and islands, refueling, repairs, endless navigation. They'd have to rely on radio communication, so spotty it made dial-up internet look like divine revelation. And at least part of the journey would take them over the vast Pacific Ocean, a stretch so empty that even today, pilots treat it like a giant blue shrug. Amelia planned it meticulously. She worked with engineers, navigators, and officials. She chose her plane carefully. The Lockheed Electra 10E, a sleek twin-engine beauty outfitted with long-range fuel tanks, and the aviation equivalent of good intentions. Her navigator, Fred Noonan, was one of the best in the business. A man who could find an island the size of a basketball in a sea the size of the sky. Together, they plotted a route that would start in Oakland, California, and zigzag around the globe. South America, Africa, India, Southeast Asia, Australia, the Pacific, and back home. The first attempt, in March 1937, was a disaster. The plane crashed on takeoff in Hawaii. No one was hurt, but the aircraft was damaged. Amelia, ever unflappable, treated it like a minor inconvenience. The kind of thing that happens when you're trying to circumnavigate the planet. And physics briefly objects. 3 months later, she tried again. June 1st, 1937. The flight began. Smoothly, they crossed South America, Africa, and Asia. Record pace, flawless execution. By late June, they had only one leg left, from Lae, New Guinea, to tiny Howland Island. A speck in the Pacific no bigger than Central Park. If they could reach it, they'd refuel and head for Hawaii, then back to California. The finish line was in sight, but somewhere over the Pacific, something went wrong. July 2nd, 1937, the morning of the flight to Howland Island. The sky over Lae, New Guinea, was soft and overcast, the kind of grey that feels undecided. A sky that hasn't had its coffee yet. Amelia and Fred Noonan prepared the Lockheed Electra for takeoff. They checked their charts, their compass, their fuel. and probably also their nerves, because they were about to attempt a 500-mile flight over an ocean so vast it made empty. Look crowded. The Pacific Ocean is not a place you get lost in. It's a place you disappear in. And the worst part, Howland Island, their destination, wasn't just small. It was microscopic. A narrow strip of coral in the middle of nowhere, halfway between Hawaii and Australia. So insignificant that even cartographers seemed to draw it with a sigh. Hitting it from the air was like throwing a dart at a grain of rice. Amelia took off at dawn. The Electra roared down the runway, heavy with fuel, wobbling slightly before lifting into the uncertain gray sky. It was supposed to be a 20-hour flight. They'd stay in radio contact with a U.S. Coast Guard ship stationed near Howland, the Itasca. It would guide them in using radio signals, and, if needed, signal flares. Everything was in place. The plan was solid. The math, mostly, worked. But as Amelia climbed into the clouds, a quiet, invisible problem was already unfolding. Their radio equipment, crucial for navigation, was unreliable. It had a range of maybe 200 miles on a good day, and it was finicky about frequencies. Worse, Amelia and the Itasca crew were operating on different frequencies and didn't quite realize it. Imagine trying to call for help, only to find out you've been talking to an empty channel the entire time. That's how this story begins to unravel. The early hours of the flight went smoothly enough. Reports from Leigh said she was on course and in good spirits. The Electra was performing well, its twin engines humming like two tired bees who were really trying their best. But as they approached the midpoint over the Pacific, radio contact grew faint. Amelia's voice crackled through the static, calm, professional, but increasingly uncertain. We are on the line 157,337. We are running north and south. The Itasca tried to respond, but Amelia never seemed to hear them. Her transmissions were coming in strong, meaning she was close, but she couldn't hear anything back. It was the radio equivalent of shouting into the void. They sent flares, smoke signals, and messages on every frequency imaginable. Nothing. And then her last message: "We are running low on fuel. We cannot see the island. Gas is running low." Then silence. No distress call. No mayday. Just the empty hum of static, stretching across the ocean. Somewhere, the world's most famous pilot had vanished into air and water, leaving behind only questions. The Itasca searched desperately. They scoured the horizon, the sky, the waves. They followed her supposed flight path, calculating every possible drift, every possible error. But the Pacific is enormous, a map of infinity. Within hours, the Coast Guard launched one of the largest search operations in history. Dozens of ships, aircraft, and crews combed tens of thousands of square miles of ocean. For 2 weeks, they searched. They found nothing. No wreckage, no oil slick, no parachutes, not even a scrap of silver fuselage. It was as if Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan had simply flown off the edge of the world. And because humans are allergic to not knowing, the theories began immediately. Some believed they crashed into the ocean near Howland, a simple, tragic accident. They ran out of fuel, ditched into the waves, and sank before help could arrive. Others believed they survived the crash, perhaps landing on a nearby uninhabited island, Nikomororo, 400 miles southeast, where they lived as castaways until their supplies ran out. Still others insisted the truth was far stranger. Some claimed the Japanese captured them, mistaking them for spies. Some said Amelia was actually a spy for the US, and her disappearance was part of a secret intelligence mission gone wrong. Some went even further, suggesting she was rescued, given a new identity, and lived quietly under the name Irene. Bolham in New Jersey, because apparently all great mysteries eventually end in New Jersey. And there were the truly creative theories that she was abducted by aliens, that she flew into a time warp, or that she discovered a hidden civilization. A flying fish who politely asked her not to tell anyone. The world was obsessed because Amelia wasn't just a person, she was a symbol, and symbols don't vanish quietly. Newsreels showed her smiling face again and again. The nation grieved like it had lost a daughter, a friend, and its collective sense of certainty. For months, headlines screamed her name. Amelia Earhart lost. ATC. World mourns heroine of the air. Where is Amelia? Even President Roosevelt joined the search. He authorized military reconnaissance flights. Something unheard of for a civilian disappearance. It didn't matter. The Pacific kept its secret. And slowly, painfully, the story faded from newsprint into legend. It's easy to imagine that final scene. Though no one saw it, the vast blue ocean stretching in every direction, a plane skimming low, searching desperately for an island that might as well be a mirage. Fuel gauges sinking toward empty. A pilot, calm but aware. A navigator, scanning charts that no longer make sense. And then, nothing but sky and silence. It's tragic. Yes, but also weirdly poetic. Because Amelia Earhart spent her life chasing the horizon. And in the end, she became part of it. When Amelia vanished, the world didn't just lose a pilot, it lost its sense of certainty. Because if Amelia Earhart, the most famous aviator alive, the symbol of precision, bravery, and competence, could vanish without a trace, then what chance did the rest of us have at keeping track of our keys? The disappearance wasn't just a mystery. It was an existential crisis with propellers. The US government responded immediately. President Franklin D. Roosevelt personally authorized an unprecedented search effort. Over 66 aircraft and 9 ships, covering more than 250,000 square miles of ocean. The Navy's massive aircraft carrier USS Lexington joined the hunt, along with the Colorado and the Itasca. They scanned the Pacific from sunrise to sunset, tracing imaginary flight paths, squinting at empty waves, hoping to find something, anything. But the ocean remained utterly indifferent. Every morning, a few hundred sailors woke up, stared out into the vast blue void, and thought, yeah, she could literally be anywhere. Because that was the problem. They weren't looking for a lost airplane. They were looking for a needle in an ocean made entirely of needles. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into quiet frustration. The newspapers began to lose their patience. By mid-July, headlines shifted from rescue imminent to search fails to find Earhart. It wasn't malicious, just the slow, bureaucratic fade of optimism into paperwork. The Navy eventually had to call it on July 19, 1937, just over 2 weeks after her disappearance. The search was officially ended. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan were declared lost at sea. It was a neat, efficient phrase for something profoundly unsettling. And just like that, the story stopped being a rescue mission and became a mystery. But mysteries have a strange way of growing when you feed them silence. And the disappearance of Amelia Earhart became America's favorite unsolved riddle. At first, the explanations were reasonable: human error, mechanical failure, fuel miscalculation. But as the years went on, logic got bored and left the room. And that's when things got deliciously weird. The first wave of theories focused on navigation. Fred Noonan, after all, was an expert navigator. But celestial navigation isn't easy when you're flying through overcast skies. He used a sextant, the stars, and geometry, which is impressive, but only works if you can see literally anything. Many believed they simply missed Howland Island by a few miles, circled desperately, ran out of fuel, and crashed into the ocean. That was the official theory. Neat, tragic, and depressingly plausible. But plausible theories are never enough for humans. We crave drama. We crave scandal. We crave closure that feels cinematic. And so, the conspiracy era began. Some claimed Earhart and Noonan had been captured by the Japanese. According to this theory, they were forced down near the Marshall Islands, taken prisoner, and later executed as spies. The evidence: a handful of blurry photographs, a few eyewitness accounts collected decades later, and the human tendency to assume any unsolved mystery must involve espionage. It had everything: intrigue, wartime tension, and just enough plausibility to make people argue about it at dinner parties for 70 years. The Navy looked into it. Historians debated it, but no concrete proof ever emerged. Still, the image stuck. Amelia Earhart, prisoner of the Japanese Empire, her silver plane confiscated, her fate hidden away in classified files. It was tragic. It was dramatic. And most importantly, it was impossible to disprove. Then there was this spy theory. According to this one, Earhart's round-the-world flight was actually a secret reconnaissance mission for the US government, because obviously, the best way to run a covert operation is to send one of the most famous people in the world in a bright silver airplane plastered with her own name. The logic was flawless. The story went that Amelia was sent to photograph Japanese military installations in the Pacific. When her plane went down, the US denied involvement. It's the kind of story that only makes sense if you whisper it dramatically in a smoky bar. But for many, it explained everything: the missing plane, the government secrecy, the odd silences. In official reports, it also gave the disappearance a noble twist. She hadn't died chasing fame. She died for her country. It was inspiring, patriotic, and conveniently unverifiable. But by far the most delightfully absurd theory came decades later, the Irene Bolam theory. In the 1960s, a man named Joseph Gervais claimed that Amelia Earhart had survived the crash, returned to the United States under a false identity, and lived quietly as a New Jersey banker named Irene Bolam. He even wrote a book about it, Amelia Earhart Lives, which, in fairness, is a fantastic title if you're not too concerned about facts. Gervais claimed to have met Bolam in person and found her resemblance to Earhart uncanny. He took photographs, compared their handwriting, and built an entire argument that Bolam was Amelia, retired from fame, tired of the spotlight. Bolam, who was very much alive at the time, responded with the only appropriate reaction. She sued him for everything he had. She also held a press conference to say, in essence, I am not Amelia Earhart, and if I were, I'd have better things to do. The book was pulled from shelves. Gervais became a running joke in the historical community. And Bolam lived out her life, possibly amused, possibly furious, definitely not Amelia Earhart. But even that didn't stop the theory, because the thing about great mysteries is, the truth doesn't matter as much as the possibility dot, and through it all, one fact remained unshakable. No confirmed trace of Amelia Earhart's plane was ever found. Not a rivet, not a fragment of metal, not a bone that could be definitively linked to her. Just endless theories, endless searches, and a century of fascination with a woman who somehow managed to vanish in the age of cameras and still be remembered in the age of satellites. After the official search ended, Amelia Earhart's disappearance could have faded quietly into legend. It could have become just another tragic line in the long, polite obituary of early aviation. But no, humans are not built for quiet endings. We crave answers the way cats crave attention, constantly, dramatically, and often to our own detriment. So, the search for Amelia Earhart never really stopped. It just changed uniforms. The US Navy had given up. The dreamers took over the next 9 decades. Amelia's name became a compass for every kind of explorer imaginable. Scientists, historians, treasure hunters, conspiracy theorists, and the occasional man with a metal detector who was absolutely certain he'd solved the mystery after one particularly vivid dream. Her disappearance became an entire industry. Books, documentaries, expeditions, all trying to find one missing airplane and to missing people in an ocean the size of 16 million square miles. It's like trying to find your car keys in a hurricane. But the beauty of the Amelia Earhart mystery is that it sits right at the intersection of logic and hope. There's just enough evidence to make you think, maybe, and just enough mystery to make you whisper, probably not. The first serious post-war theory came from the 1940s, the Nikomororo hypothesis. Nikomororo, then called Gardner Island, is a coral atoll in what's now the Republic of Kiribati. It's about 350 miles southeast of Howland, close enough to make sense. Far enough to make searching miserable in 1940. British colonial officers discovered human remains there, part of a skeleton, a shoe, a sextant box, and a few artifacts that looked, intriguingly, American. At the time, no one made much of it. The bones were shipped to Fiji, examined by a doctor who decided they belonged to a short, stocky man. Case closed, except decades later, researchers re-examined the doctor's notes and said, "Wait a minute, these measurements look more like a tall woman." Cue the ominous music. The theory goes like this. Amelia missed Howland Island, ran out of fuel, spotted Nikomaroro, and landed on its reef. She and Fred Noonan survived, for a while, scavenging supplies, sending faint radio distress calls, and waiting for help that never came. Eventually, the tides claimed the plane, and time claimed everything else. It's tragic, cinematic, and, best of all, it's possible. That's why people can't let it go. Over the years, multiple expeditions have gone to Nikomaroro to look for clues. The island is beautiful, remote, and utterly inhospitable. A sunburn waiting to happen, wrapped in mosquitoes and coconut trees. Search teams have found small artifacts, a piece of aluminum possibly from a Lockheed Electra, a woman's shoe. From the 1930s, bits of glass that might be from old cosmetics jars, and the faint outline of a campsite. They even found a skeleton of a turtle with its shell cracked open, suggesting someone, possibly human, had eaten it. It's haunting, but inconclusive. Each discovery could be the clue of the century, or just beach trash with great timing. But that's how the Earhart mystery works. Every clue is both proof and not proof. Every artifact is both definitely hers and possibly unrelated scrap metal. It's a Schrodinger's airplane, both found and lost at the same time. And the people who search for her, they've become characters in their own story. There's the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, TIGAR, a team of dedicated researchers who've led over a dozen expeditions to Nikomaroro since the 1980s. They've spent millions of dollars, countless hours, and several lifetimes worth of sunburn chasing evidence. They've mapped the island, dived offshore, even used ground-penetrating radar. Each time, they come back with something, never quite enough to end the mystery, but always enough to keep it alive. And that's the secret genius of the Amelia Earhart story. It's designed for eternal almosts. Then there are the more eccentric searchers, the lone inventors and backyard adventurers convinced they've cracked the case with homemade maps and red yarn on corkboards. One man claimed he'd found her plane in the jungles of Papua New Guinea. Another insisted it was buried beneath a World War II runway. Someone else said she'd landed in the Marshall Islands, where locals remembered a woman pilot arriving decades earlier. The pattern is always the same: a headline, a flurry of excitement, and then nothing. Because Amelia Earhart's greatest trick was not disappearing. It was staying just visible enough to never be forgotten. And, of course, the internet made everything worse. Now, every year, new YouTube channels, podcasts, and forums emerge, each one promising to finally reveal the truth. Spoiler, they never do. But oh, the passion, the energy, The absolute conviction of someone typing "I know where Amelia is" at 2 a.m. on Reddit. Armed with Google Earth and vibes. It's beautiful. Because this isn't just about her anymore. It's about us, our obsession with closure, our need for control, and our inability to accept that sometimes the world just doesn't tell us what happened. And through it all, the Pacific remains stubbornly quiet. Somewhere beneath its surface, there might be an airplane, or there might be nothing at all. Just silence, salt, and the faint echo of a woman who flew too far into legend to ever come back. The strange thing about vanishing is that, if you do it right, people never stop talking about you. Amelia Earhart didn't just disappear. She transcended. Most people die. Amelia became a concept. She turned from a person into a symbol, from flesh and flight suits into myth and metaphor. And that's really the highest form of human fame. To become the kind of ghost who still inspires motivational posters 90 years later. You've probably seen her face 1,000 times in black and white. Photos on t-shirts, postage stamps, keychains, even action figures. A steady gaze, leather cap, wind-tossed hair, and the faint expression of someone who knows she's about to do something. Everyone else will need a century to understand. She is confidence, courage, and calm rebellion in one photograph. The female counterpart to Lindbergh, yes, but with better style and far less awkward politics. And after she vanished, the world didn't mourn her. It adopted her. At first, she was remembered as a tragic heroine, the brave woman who flew too far. But then, slowly, her legend evolved. She became a symbol of women's empowerment, not just for what she achieved, but for what she refused to accept. In the 1930s, when women were expected to master ironing boards, not altimeters, Amelia was out there breaking altitude records and cultural ceilings at the same time. She wasn't trying to be a symbol, of course. She just wanted to fly. But in the process, she became the perfect embodiment of a movement that hadn't quite found its language yet. A woman who didn't ask for permission to exist at the altitude of her choosing. It's hard not to love that. By the 1940s and 50s, her image was practically canonized. Schools named after her. Girls' clubs used her name. Aviation magazines wrote wistful articles about her courage. Even World War II pilots, both men and women, carried her photo as a kind of lucky charm, proof that daring and decency could coexist. She became a national saint of independence, a woman who literally refused to stay grounded. And the fact that she disappeared, that only made her more perfect, because a hero who dies is sad, but a hero who vanishes, who becomes unsolved, eternal, and just slightly spooky, that's marketing gold. Hollywood noticed, of course. They've been obsessed with her for decades. Amelia Earhart has appeared in films, plays, cartoons, and television specials, sometimes as herself, sometimes as a mysterious figure haunting the edges of history. In one movie, she's portrayed as a determined pioneer. In another, as a woman in love with adventure. and in Night at the Museum too. She's reincarnated as an immortal wax figure who flirts with Ben Stiller, because apparently that's how we process grief. Now, pop culture never really figured out whether to mourn her or make her flirtatious. So it did both, and that's sort of beautiful. We turned her into a Rorschach test for everything we admire, fear, and desire about human ambition. But perhaps the strangest part of her immortality is how ordinary her life actually was. Before the records and the headlines, she worked as a nurse's aide, a social worker, even a teacher. She baked bread, loved dogs, and once described her ideal evening as a cup of tea and a good book. She wasn't some reckless thrill seeker chasing adrenaline. She was methodical, intelligent, and sometimes painfully shy. Her closest friends described her as gentle, but unyielding, a person who could smile kindly while politely ignoring all your advice. She didn't fly for attention. She flew because she couldn't not fly. And that's why her disappearance hurts a little more than most. Because it wasn't vanity that took her into the Pacific. It was purpose by the 1970s and 1980s. Amelia Earhart's face became shorthand for empowerment. When feminists needed a cultural ancestor, there she was, wind in her hair, eyes on the horizon. She stood beside icons like Susan B. Anthony and Eleanor Roosevelt, who, by the way, was one of her friends, because of course she was. Together, they represented a new mythology, one where bravery wasn't about war or conquest, but about the quiet, stubborn act of being yourself. Amelia once said, "Courage is the price that life exacts for granting peace." That line ended up on posters, mugs, yearbooks, and dorm room walls. And even if people forgot where it came from, they remembered how it felt. But over time, her story became more than inspiration. It became possession. Everyone wanted a piece of her. Historians wanted to solve her. Feminists wanted to claim her. Conspiracy theorists wanted to resurrect her. And marketers, God bless them, wanted to sell her. You can buy Amelia Earhart perfumes, lipsticks, luggage, watches, even NFTs, because apparently not even digital space is safe. There are brands that use her name to sell anything remotely adventurous, from flight schools to energy drinks. If Amelia could see it, she'd probably roll her eyes, then admire the entrepreneurial spirit. Because she understood that fame is a double-edged propeller. It lifts you, and then it spins out of control. And yet, through all the myth-making, one thing about her remains refreshingly clear. She was never afraid to fail. That's what people forget. Amelia wasn't chasing perfection. She was chasing possibility. She failed constantly, publicly, and gracefully. She crashed planes. She lost money. She made mistakes. And she did it all with that same calm smile, as if to say, well, at least it was interesting. Maybe that's why she still feels so modern, because in an age where everyone's afraid to look foolish, Amelia reminds us that failure can be romantic, that falling, even from the sky, can be a kind of grace. You'd think that, by now, we would have moved on, after all. It's been almost 90 years since Amelia Earhart vanished into the Pacific. 9 decades of searching, debating, arguing, mapping, remapping, scanning, and YouTubing. But we haven't stopped. We won't stop, because we're not really looking for Amelia anymore. We're looking for certainty. And certainty is the one thing more elusive than a missing airplane. C. Human beings are addicted to closure. We can't stand open doors. We can't handle question marks. We would rather believe something, even if it's completely wrong, than live with the unbearable itch of we don't know. That's why the Amelia Earhart mystery has lasted so long. It's not about her, it's about us, about our deep, primal discomfort with not having the last page of the story. When someone disappears completely, they take part of our narrative structure with them. They leave a hole where the ending should be, and so we fill it with theories, guesses, fiction, and fan art. Because silence terrifies us. But here's the thing. The reason mysteries like this stay alive isn't because we can't solve them. It's because, deep down, we don't want to. We like the not knowing. It's comforting. It keeps the story alive, forever unfolding, never disappointing. Because what if we did find her plane tomorrow? What if someone dredged it up from the ocean floor, perfectly preserved, the mystery solved? It would be fine, a new story for a week. Then it would fade, boxed up in a museum, labeled, catalogued, explained. And all that wonder, all that speculation, poetry, and romance would evaporate in the face of a fact. The mystery would die of closure. And no one wants that. So instead, we keep searching just enough. We build documentaries with titles like The Final Search and The Truth About Amelia Earhart. We write books with confident subtitles. What really happened? And then fill them with 90% possibly and 10%. Who knows? We fund expeditions. We argue on the internet. We keep her in orbit. And in doing so, we turn her into something eternal, a shared myth disguised as a detective story. Because maybe what Amelia represents isn't loss. Maybe it's the permission to wonder. There's also something deeply satisfying about imagining her final flight. Not the tragic crash version, the cinematic version. The one where she makes it to some hidden island, steps out of the plane, looks around at the endless sea, and laughs softly to herself. Figures. She says, missed it by that much. And then she builds a little hut, eats coconuts, and quietly watches the sun go down every night, perfectly at peace with the absurdity of it all. That version is comforting, isn't it? Because it lets us imagine that courage doesn't always end in disaster. Sometimes it just ends in mystery. And in a strange way, that's more romantic. It's also why Amelia Earhart has this weird immortality that other famous figures don't. Charles Lindbergh, her male counterpart, lived to old age and got bogged down in politics, scandals, and awkward speeches. He became complicated, messy, human. Amelia never got that chance. She vanished at the peak of her myth, untouchable, perfect, unfinished. It's like she exited at intermission, leaving the audience forever waiting for the next act. And in that waiting, we made her flawless. She became the eternal hero. Pure courage, pure curiosity, no footnotes, No awkward aftertaste. It's the same phenomenon that keeps figures like James Dean and Marilyn Monroe frozen in time. We fill the silence they left behind with everything we wish they had been. And there's another layer, one that's less poetic and more personal for many people. Amelia Earhart is the symbol of search itself, the idea that even if you never find what you're looking for, the act of searching still matters. That's what makes her disappearance so hypnotic. It reminds us that life isn't about finishing the map. It's about the fact that you kept going even when the lines ran out. She was, quite literally, someone who looked at a globe and said, "Not enough lines." And we, the ones left behind, keep tracing her path, not to find her, but to keep that spirit alive. The mystery also gives us something Amelia probably never intended: a communal campfire. A story everyone knows, everyone can argue about, everyone can dream through. Kids learn about her in school. Pilots still toast her in flight clubs. Writers still name characters after her. She's everywhere. The world's most famous ghost, haunting our need to believe that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. And maybe that's the real comfort. Because the day we find her plane is the day we lose her story. And what's the fun in that? When Amelia vanished, she didn't just leave behind an empty patch of ocean. She left behind a template, a pattern, a script for every great mystery that followed. You can trace her absence like a shadow through the rest of the 20th century. In every lost expedition, every vanishing satellite, every blinking signal that says, "Still here." Maybe because after Amelia, disappearance stopped being just tragedy. It became romantic. It became something sacred, a place where possibility never dies. When the space age arrived, NASA became her spiritual heir. It's almost poetic, really. You had astronauts in the 1960s, young, clean-cut, impossibly brave, talking about adventure, discovery, and pushing the boundaries of human flight. Sound familiar? They even had the same stoic, polite swagger that Amelia perfected decades earlier. They were her successors, just with better radios. And when something went wrong, when Apollo 13 went silent, when probes vanished into the void, the tone was eerily familiar. The same anxious waiting, the same headlines, the same question echoing through the static. Do you think they'll make it back? Amelia's flight had already taught the world what it felt like to hold its breath across a distance too wide. To imagine she was the prototype for the missing transmission, the unreachable hero. The figure lost to the horizon and preserved by longing. She turned exploration into a kind of shared heartbeat. Even her disappearance rippled into pop culture in ways that are so subtle. We don't even notice them anymore. Every story about her, vanished adventurer, a lost city, a mysterious ship, it all carries her DNA. The Bermuda Triangle, basically the Amelia Earhart expanded universe. Every sci-fi plot about astronauts lost in space. Every movie where someone says, "We've lost contact." Every haunting radio signal that fades into static. That's her echo, replaying forever. She turned the void into a character, and we've been writing sequels to it ever since. Writers love her because she's the perfect metaphor. You can make her mean anything you want. To some, she's courage. To others, she's tragedy. To some, she's feminism. To others, she's proof that humans will always push too far into the unknown just to see if it blinks back. Amelia Earhart is Schrodinger's heroine, both dead and alive, lost and found, human and myth. She's the ultimate open ending, and storytellers live for those. There's a reason every decade gets its own Amelia movie, or TV special, or children's book. Because her story fits every mood. You can make it a love story, a thriller, a ghost story, an inspiration. And every version feels true, because none of them can be proven wrong. That's the secret perk of vanishing gracefully. You get to be right forever, even in aviation. Her legacy is weirdly tangible when female pilots take off. Now, they're flying in her slipstream, sometimes literally. Since there are aircraft still painted with her number. Flight clubs hold annual Amelia flyovers. Air shows reenact her takeoff. And yes, there are still people who look up at the sky and whisper, "Fly safe, Amelia," as if she's up there somewhere, forever circling the clouds. It's strangely comforting, because Amelia Earhart isn't remembered as someone who failed. She's remembered as someone who kept going, so far that we still can't catch up. Even technology, all our satellites, sonar scans, AI models, and ocean robots, somehow feel like tributes to her. We keep sending machines into the unknown, hoping they'll find something. But half the time, they just disappear. It's like the universe saw Amelia and thought, "Oh, we're doing this now. Great." Lost Mars rovers, deep-sea drones, communication blackouts, every time it happens, the language is the same. We've lost contact. Those 3 words are Amelia's lullaby, sung by a century of explorers who keep learning the same lesson, that the horizon always wins. And maybe that's why her story endures. Because we live in a world that's mapped, measured, and digitized to death, we can track packages from space and see our own homes on Google Earth. Mystery feels impossible. But Amelia reminds us that even with all our precision and planning, the world can still swallow a legend whole and never burp. She's proof that not everything can be solved, explained, or pinned down. That some parts of the human story are meant to remain blurry. And we need that. We need a few mysteries to keep us humble. Because without them, we might start believing we actually know what we're doing. And history has proven that we absolutely do not. So here we are, nearly a century later. The year doesn't matter anymore, because Amelia Earhart exists outside of calendars now. She's a fixed point in human imagination, floating somewhere between history and dream. The Pacific still stretches, endlessly blue, calm, enormous, smugly withholding its secrets. The sky still opens like an invitation every morning. And somewhere in between, the idea of Amelia still flies, invisible, eternal, powered by curiosity and caffeine. We've built satellites that can see dust storms on Mars, but we still can't find her airplane. We've mapped the ocean floor, but we can't quite explain where she went. It's almost as if the universe decided to keep one last thing for itself. And that feels right, doesn't it? Because Amelia Earhart didn't belong to logic. She belonged to wonder, and wonder, by definition, refuses to be solved. Sometimes. Late at night, historians and dreamers alike still look at maps and think, maybe tomorrow someone will find a wing, a propeller, a single, undeniable clue, and maybe they will. But I like to think that somewhere, at the edge of everything, there's a small strip of coral, sun-bleached and quiet, where a silver plane rests, half buried in sand, its metal warm from the sun, its cockpit empty but still humming faintly with the echo of a voice saying, "We're on the line 157,337. We're running north and south, and then just wind, water, and eternity." Amelia's greatest flight was never the one she completed. It was the one she didn't, because in vanishing, she did something extraordinary. She made us look up and keep looking. She made us fall in love with the idea that the world still has edges, still has blank spaces on the map, still has corners where reality frays into maybe. That's rare now. We live in an age where we can ask our phones any question and get an answer in 0.3 seconds, which is great for recipes, but terrible for mystery. Amelia Earhart is our last ungoogled dream, and in that, she's become something larger than herself. The patron saint of curiosity, the unofficial goddess of not knowing, the human reminder that the horizon is never done with us. When people say she disappeared, I always want to correct them. She didn't disappear. She just kept going, further than the maps, further than the charts, further than anyone could follow. And maybe that's the real point of her story. Not to solve it, but to sit with it. To accept that sometimes the best stories don't end. They just glide out of view, engines low, lights blinking faintly, until they become one with the stars. It's funny. For all the searching we've done, maybe Amelia wasn't lost at all. Maybe she found exactly what she was looking for. Freedom, silence, sky. The kind of peace you only get when there's no one left to ask, "Where are you going?" Maybe that's what she wanted all along. Not to be remembered for arriving, but for leaving beautifully. So the next time you hear a plane overhead at night, don't look for it. Just listen. Listen to the hum fading into distance. Listen to the soft hiss of static on a radio that hasn't been tuned in 90 years. And for a moment, imagine she's still out there, flying low, smiling to herself, perfectly content in the one place where no one can ever find her. Because not every journey needs a landing. Some stories are meant to drift forever, like a silver plane over an endless sea, powered by hope, defiance, and one woman's quiet refusal to stop moving forward. Sleep well, dreamer. And if you ever find yourself chasing something impossible, don't worry too much about the destination. Just make sure you've got enough fuel, a good navigator, and the courage to keep going, even when the map runs out. After all, somewhere above the clouds, Amelia's still out there, and she's probably smiling.